Thanks for jumping into the Weekend Rewind. We are rewinding like ages ago, I think 2018. This is very early days, First Time Facilitator, but this conversation still resonates, is with Sue Johnston. She's a facilitator over in New Zealand. And I just love her advice, her wisdom when it comes to hosting groups. I hope you enjoy this one, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. My guest today is Sue Johnston. And after my chat with Sue, I understood why she came so highly recommended. In the space of 40 minutes, we cover a lot of practical things when it comes to facilitation, but we also talk about the importance of preparation and why it's critical to determine the purpose of your workshops and outline the outcomes too. Welcome to the podcast, Sue Johnston.
Thank you so much, Liam. What a wonderful introduction.
Oh, you're very welcome. Look, Sue, every time I interview a guest on the show, I hear that they've come from a range of backgrounds and industries. Yours is in nursing and policy work. So I'm curious as to how you entered the world of facilitation.
I suspect I entered the world of facilitation in much the same way as other facilitators, and that's almost sort of being pushed into it, or it just happens. You know, it's not like I said, right, I'm ready to be a facilitator now. And so I look back, you've made me reflect on, so this is about 10 years ago now. And in my reflection, I can see that it started with things like running a project where we had a teleconference of people from around the country, and they needed someone to run the teleconference. And I don't know if you've ever experienced those sort of situations where there's lots of silence and no one's really sure about how we manage the process or what we do. And I can see that that's where I cut my teeth, if you like, on facilitating. And it was basically because I wanted an outcome from the meeting. I wanted a good outcome from the meeting. So I thought, well, I'll lead this, and let's just get on with what the purpose of this, us all getting together, is. So that's sort of how it started, really.
Nice. So what did you do? Where did you look for sources or information on getting those outcomes on your teleconference? Because, yes, you're right. I have been on those phone calls where you put a question out and no one really responds. So I'd love to know what strategies you have for that environment.
So how did I learn? For a start, I learnt by experiencing both good and bad in person and, teleconference type meetings. So I thought, God, why is this person doing it this way? Why don't they do it this way? And then you see someone do it well. So you go, that was good. I could try that. So for a start, it was very much around just by example, seeing how other people did it. And at that stage, I wasn't going, right, I'm going to be a facilitator. So I wasn't naturally going to look for those sort of tools and techniques. I was still very much embedded in my analytical and my sort of policy process environment. So that was sort of my key thing. And this was a sideline of how we get the work done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And that's interesting because you mentioned in one of our earlier chats that you are a bit of an introvert. And so, so I guess did going through this process give you some tools to be more confident to then make the step of running workshops in front of groups? How did you make that progress in sort of small steps?
Okay, so how I made the progress, I think it always takes, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, a bit of courage to stand up and say you're going to facilitate. And for me, I was very aware that I had to have my my security blanket of preparation with me. So I learned how to, if I was prepared and I had thought through what I needed to be able to do in the meeting, that helped. And my key tool that I use every time I facilitate is that I spend time before the facilitation, quite a bit of time investing in understanding what my client needs in terms of the purpose of the day. And once I'm clear with that, I can manage whatever goes on in the meeting. So there's a sort of a mental process for me. The more prepared I am and the more I understand the purpose of the day, then the better it runs. And I have to say, in that process, it's probably not a surprise to facilitators to discover that sometimes they want you to facilitate something and they are not clear about the purpose of the day. They're not clear what they actually want. They just want something. And so So by doing that process with them up front, we get very clear about the purpose of the day, and I make it clear back in my proposal and my brief to them that this is the outcome you have said you want, this is the purpose of the day, and that's what I will be aiming to give you. Is that right? And once I have that, the introvert in me has a process, has a thing to put the whole day around, and that makes it so much easier for me.
Yeah, I have been in situations where I've been approached to run something and they have said, "Hey, look, we just want a team day. We just want to all get along better." And then what kind of questions do you ask to really dig down and get to the to the roots of the problem, or what they're really wanting to achieve?
Very, very good question. So if I see them in person, all the better. But if not, it's a phone call. And we start by saying, I start with really big questions like, why do you want this day? All we need to do is, it's things like we've got to redo our strategy. We've got to get people together in a room, and we're a bit afraid of how they will, but they need to, or something along those lines. And so this type of questions I ask are, why do you want this day? Imagine it's the end of the day. What would make you think this day has been worth it? And I get them to imagine what it's like. That I get them to imagine that, yep, this has been a good day. And I say, what has happened for you to feel that way? And that's usually quite a good way of getting them to focus on what they want out of it, and therefore who they need in the room and how much time you might need, and all those other sort of questions that we ask after that.
Sure. And then I guess you get that information, and over the 10 years of being a facilitator, do you have like a bucket of resources, or are there certain models that you always kind of lean on? Do you have any favourites?
I do. I do have favourites. So if they're wanting to do strategy, etc., my go-to is a strengths-based approach. In fact, all my facilitation is based on strengths-based work. So in this case, it's using Appreciative Inquiry. And, the sort of usual strategy day will say, let's look at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. In the strengths-based approach, that becomes strengths, opportunities, aspirations and results. And so what that does, it takes their brain to a much better place to do the strategy and the dreaming without fail. I have to say, the outcomes of the day they love. They're surprised where they get to, the conversations that they have. Strengths-based approach would be definitely one, and using Appreciative Inquiry. So that's a big one for strategy.
Yeah. So with strengths, I've run some strengths workshops previously, and it's all about maximising your potential and really doubling down on what makes you unique and great. The feedback I sometimes get in those workshops is, well, what do I do about my weaknesses? Do you get that question a lot, and what do you respond with?
That reminds me of a strategy day I did with a board of a tech company, and one of the members, even though I requested that they put away their laptops and stuff, continued to look at it and really wasn't engaging. And we got to the part of the day where we were doing the aspirations, and it's all about giving them a future scenario and saying, imagine that you're reading that you've done this in the Financial Times or whatever. What does that look like, and what are your clients saying, and whatever. And he just went, it's saying that we're bankrupt and we've gone under.
Whoa.
Okay, so this is he's determined that we go there. And I said, okay, so what happened for it to get to that point? What did you do? What did your company do? So I still made him go back and think about what was happening in their world, what happened in their company to get to that point. But that was a bit of a, some people will go, why aren't we doing? If we don't understand our threats and we don't understand this, we're not going to get there. Well, actually, once you've got your aspirations and you go to your results and you have a look at what you need to stop doing, you'll identify your weaknesses. You'll say, we can't carry on doing that in this way. So it's a different way of getting there, and it keeps the brain in this lovely place of still being able to solve problems and still being able to get the stuff out of the strategy day, and instead of going down holes, and you've seen that, right? You've seen them.
Yeah.
Someone starts well, remember that time that happened, and everyone goes, yes, and suddenly they're off, and you're, oh my goodness, that's not going to help them get to the purpose of the day, which is to look at something new and different.
That's a really great example. So how do you steer them in the right direction if it does, if there's a turning point in the room and, the mood changes?
I call it. I notice it. So I just say, I'm noticing that there's a bit of hesitancy or whatever in the room. It looks like you've got some, if they've got a particular issue, I'll say, I'll have a board. I use things like questions boards or, holding pages. They can go and put their questions up there because, it's important to get it out and put it up there. And then I'll come back and I'll say the purpose of the day is this. If we go there, I'm concerned we won't reach the purpose of the day. And then depending on the size of the group and who the client is, there may be a follow-up discussion just with one person and saying, you've got options here. What do you want to do with that? But you can't ignore it. Otherwise, it just gets out of control.
Yeah, that's right. So recognising it and calling it at the time is probably a really great. Well, it is. Yeah, if you ignore it, what can happen?
If you ignore it, and that has happened to me in early days because I didn't have the confidence to do that. And what happens is your day gets hijacked by some frustrated or angry individuals in the room who perhaps don't want to be there, or who perhaps are actually a bit afraid of what might happen. Yeah. Don't trust the process for whatever reason, they've been made to come or whatever it is, then that can be hijacked and you can end up having the sort of meeting which I've been a participant of, which is that you don't achieve what you think you've come there and taken a day off work to do. Yeah. And that just ends up being frustrating for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the confidence to call it's a really important skill. In your observation, what are some other really critical skills for facilitation?
I think the one that I mentioned earlier is to be able to think of the fact that you have, it's not just the facilitation on the day, that you actually start the process and get the purpose really clear at the start. I would say doing your preparation and being clear about the purpose would be the thing that drives everything else. I think another key skill would be your ability to read what's going on in the room. And pick up the temperature. You'll know when you're having if there's small group discussions, if there's not much noise coming as opposed to a lot of noise, what's actually going on, and to react and change depending on what's going on. So in my head, I might have sorted what I think the sessions might be and what order they might go. But then when the group comes together, I may need to change the way that I do that. I still have exactly the same purpose clear in my head, but I may need to change the way that I do it. I may need to put bigger groups together or smaller groups together or mix them up or play some music or something,
Yeah, just like a trigger point to change up the mood. So when you run sessions, facilitate to a variety of different audiences, what do you actually change when it comes to pitching to a different type of audience? Do you change anything at all, or is it just the way that you deliver the material? Does the material stay the same? Just keen to hear what you do mix up.
I do mix up the material. What doesn't change is the process to get to the purpose and the outcome. In terms of asking the sorts of questions that I ask, like what do you want out of the day, that remains the same. What I put together is customized for who's in the room. So if it's a group that know each other well, that's completely different from a group that don't get together, or you've got a group of stakeholders who've never been together in the room before. So the types of things that I might do in that situation are different, and the way that I might design the day will be different than, an in-house team, for example.
Yeah, I really like that you keep referring to your the preparation, and I think you should write a blueprint on this. I'd find it really useful. I can just use in my workshop.
I'm happy to share the sort of after I've been to my initial meeting with a client, I do a a note back to them, and I use the same template, which talks about, first of all, what I do, and it makes very clear, because often there's a lot of invisible stuff that goes on for a facilitator in terms of preparation and design of the day. So I make it very clear in my what they're buying, and they're buying my preparation, design, and planning, as well as the facilitation of the day, and follow up. And potentially, and then I outline in dot points what the current situation is. So what I heard, I repeat back to them. This is the situation you're currently in. This is the outcome you want from the day and the purpose, etc. This is the number of people that will be in the room and how long we've got, and this is my fee. So they get a one pager, 1 to 2 pages max back, which I say, I want you to check that I have got this right. Have I got this right in terms of your current situation and what you want out of the day, and are you saying yes to this? And that then leads into the next part of the process, which is the co-design of the work with them. So I'm happy to share that template.
Awesome. Just if you link it to your website, we can pop a link on our show notes.
Yep.
Talking about the group of stakeholders, you mentioned before when we were talking about diverse audiences, and there's some people that come into these workshops and they've never met each other before. How do you get them to start working together? Do you use a particular icebreaker?
So depending, I don't know if you find this, Leanne, but often my clients want a lot done in a short space of time.
Oh, yes. And, I think that's universal.
Yeah. So whatever I can put, whatever preparation I can do before they all get in the room, I will do. So I will send things besides the agenda, which I send to everybody before the meeting. I will send a note to people. I will, if I think they're going to be particularly tricky, I will have conversations with people, or I'll give them the opportunity to talk with me or whatever, to the various participants in the room, if that's what they need. They often don't. They just want to know what's going to happen in the day. So my agenda says purpose of the day at the top. It then has an outcome for each session, so what the result of each session is going to be, so and the timing for it, so they can see really clearly how it all relates back to the purpose. So that helps before they come into the room. If they don't know each other, we can do something like just an introduction. Particular icebreakers I use are sometimes around clearing the space, which is a neuro leadership one, which is making sure everyone's brain is ready to come in. So we talk about turning off the other apps that might be on, and actually going through and talking about what those apps are that are open, and in terms of, I'm thinking about a paper I've got to get finished by the end of the day. I'm feeling nervous about that, but I'm willing to put that aside. So they do this very quick process where they clear it. And for people that don't know each other at all, it depends on, I sometimes use the different things that are in the room, like the situation that we're in. So they might be, if they are in a room that has lots of books, I'll get them to pick a book that they think is the title of their life or something.
Oh, nice.
It just depends. That. Yeah, or what's a song that they, if they were a song, what would they be? Or it really depends again on the group. There's some groups that there's so much potential to turn it into a threat response to do anything like that. It's just about introducing them to the person next to them, and that's it for a start.
Yeah, I know I've been in environments where the facilitator will say we're about to do an activity, and you can kind of see people get a little bit anxious about, well, what kind of icebreaker are we doing this time? And
yes.
So I think it is important to really recognise the characteristics of your group, the dynamics, and which icebreaker, if you do use one, will be most appropriate, and how, I guess, keen they are to open up with each other.
That's true, and that brings me to the groups that I'm really lucky to facilitate for CQ, Collective Intelligence, and what they do is because they meet 3 times a year. They're from all different industries, ages and stages in their world, and when someone new comes into their groups, they do this really cool exercise where we get them to draw a line on a whiteboard, with one end being the day they were born and the other end being today, and then they basically put dots or lines above and below the line to highlight the key things in their life that have sort of created who they are now. So the things above the line are the sort of positive things that have happened. The things below the line have been the tough stuff that's happened, and that's a really nice way of doing a succinct, this is me, But that's in a group that they're building high trust, and they know that they get together and there's high confidentiality and whatever. But I wouldn't do that in one of my strategy days with a team that don't know each other.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about the CQ, the Collective Intelligence Group that you have in New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. So Collective Intelligence have about 200 members in teams of about 8 or 9. And CQ's purpose is around growing the effectiveness of leaders and using diversity and different ways of thinking about the world to get that. So, for example, we might put together, people in the group might be from a construction industry, the wine industry, they might be a CEO, they might be a new entrepreneur with a startup tech. And I think that's part of why the magic happens. And what they do is they sometimes focus on someone's business and that person will have a key question for their business that will all go in and facilitate a session around interviewing, maybe their clients, maybe their business partner, people in their business. It might be about them personally as a leader. It might be about them as a person in terms of how they show up at work and at home. It can be anything. And it's the most wonderful landscape to facilitate in, because the people have already signed up for vulnerability. The members are all there because they want to know their blind spots. And for me, it's just such a privilege to facilitate in that sort of group, I have to say.
It sounds like a really great group, and I'm wondering if we have an equivalent over in Australia.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. CQ, and the way that it operates, that it keeps the groups going, because some of them are in there for 5 years or so.
Wow.
I don't think so. I think the closest would be mastermind groups.
Yes, yeah. I noticed that you mentioned vulnerability when you were talking about CQ, and that you're also a Brené Brown certified Daring Way coach. Can you share with us, what does that actually mean? What do you cover in your workshops?
Okay. So Daring Way stuff is a huge part of what I bring to my work now, either directly talking about it or what's in the background for me. And it's around understanding vulnerability and courage, looking at issues around authenticity, how shame shows up in our world, and I'm talking about the leaders in the leadership organisational development space, about perfectionism and what that stops us doing, and vulnerability, which is about risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure, and how we deal with that in a work environment. Yeah, so my work is around those sorts of issues, which is big.
It's pretty deep. Yeah. How did you, I guess as part of the certification, do they teach you how to work with people that sort of discover things for the first time in your workshop and it's a bit of a revelation and they don't know what to do with that information? I mean, it could get quite heavy. I guess your nursing experience would help then. But how do you work with someone that's really just discovering just information about them they didn't know before they walked into your room?
With care and with understanding that I'm not working in a clinical environment with them, so this isn't that it's not therapy. And so very much in the leadership space, it is around their getting the concepts of what it means for them as leaders. And so yes, in our certification process, it's very much about us being very comfortable and having gone through our own work to do the work. So it's very much about us understanding the concepts and having a facilitation practice that we can put that into. So the facilitation training that you do to use Brené's research assumes that you have a practice already and that you understand the issues around how to keep a group safe and work with leaders. So in terms of how I deal with that, I'm very and I use that in the same way. If I wouldn't, for example, in fact, we've got another facilitator and I are doing a weekend workshop for women around authenticity and leadership and how they show up at work. We won't be going straight to shame. We won't be going there. We'll build up to that. So the first things they'll be looking at are their values and trust, and then moving into how they show up at work and talking about their arena at work and the armor they need to take off. So there's this beautiful use of metaphor in Brené's work, which people connect with.
Yeah.
And again, it's just in the way, well, I say just, it is in the way that you care for the person to get there and make sure that they don't have a threat response and then can't, contribute and participate in the work.
Just curious, what do you, I don't know if you've run this workshop before, but I'm interested in hearing what are the barriers that you do see about people not being authentic in the workplace?
So in the authenticity place, I mean, we've all grown up. In fact, we do it as facilitators. There will be identities that we want people to see us have. Like, we want to be seen as a confident, competent, can do it, take care of them, facilitator, right? We
Absolutely.
we want to be that. And that is an identity we want them to get. The unwanted identity is, I do not want them to see that I am paddling so hard under here. I don't want them to see that it's just been a shame trigger for me and I'm wondering what the hell I do about that. I don't want, that we've got all this unwanted stuff. And somewhere in between these identities, there's us, the authentic Sue, the authentic Leanne, that is the facilitator. Or so in the room, it's the same thing, or as a leader, it's the same thing. And so it's about recognizing what gets in the way of our authenticity. And sometimes it's those identities. Sometimes it's our own shame about what we are, keeping us small and not wanting to show up. Sometimes it's the fact that we just don't have the capacity to deal with that uncertainty, so we won't go there. So the types of conversations you can have with leaders are absolutely around that stuff, and getting them to reflect on and understand what is their own story around that gets in the way of their authenticity, be it shame, be it, not wanting to put ourselves out there, wearing armor. Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on that right now because even during this podcast, not this episode in particular, but when I first started out, I'd come from listening to podcasts, really professional ones where the interviewer had been doing it for decades, and I expected myself to sort of swan in and be the same way. And that's an identity I forced upon myself. But I think it's just about keeping it real and enjoying the conversation and just learning from the people that I'm talking to. Keeping it real. Yeah.
Absolutely. The authentic Leanne.
That's right. That does sometimes stuff up but can have a laugh.
Exactly right. And you know what? I think that's exactly what, for a first-time facilitator, is the toughest thing to do. But the authentic you is the one that you need to bring to the room. Whatever it takes, as much as I'm talking about the prep and whatever I do, figure out for you what is the authentic facilitator. And the authentic Sue is different from the authentic Leanne in a way, but what we bring and what we show up is the stuff that people will connect with.
Yeah, that's right. And different groups might take out different strengths from either of us as well. And I love
absolutely.
You mentioned the word threat as well quite a bit in our conversation. Does that link into David Rock's work and the scarf theory?
Yes. So that's the other part of my work, and that is around coaching. So I'm a results certified coach with the Neuro Leadership Institute, and that's David Rock's research where he takes latest neuroscience and applies it to leadership and what that looks like. And what I love about that work and how it fits with my Daring Way stuff is that there is actually quite a lot of common threads, but one has come from quite a sociological model, which is Brené's work, and the other has come from our brain. And what he in that work points out is that if we go into a threat response, which we're much more wired to do, then we can't do the thinking and the problem solving. We can't use that part of our brain. It becomes a lot tougher to do. And so he has this wonderful scarf model, which I run through and make sure when I'm facilitating that I am addressing these things in the way that I design and do the work. So he points out that the five sort of things that can lead to a threat response. People's status not being recognised, and for some people this is far more important than others. It can happen if something uncertain happens in the room. So if you suddenly have someone going off on a tangent, or you suddenly change something from the agenda, for some people that will scarf them, that will make them go into a threat. I wasn't expecting that. Oh my goodness, what else is going to happen?
I was in a boot camp yesterday just on that, and this is just boot camp, 6 a.m. We're all signed at our stations, and then the personal trainer's like, "Oh, sorry, you're meant to be in Group B. I stuffed up," and she was really, hang on, I'm meant to be here. This is the station you assigned me, and I recognised that, and I was like, "Oh, that's so interesting." She wants that certainty.
Yeah,
and she thought she was right, and then very simple mistake, but it did put her offside.
Absolutely, yeah. It can really. And so as soon as that happens, we can't problem solve. We can't contribute in the same way that we could if we weren't scarfed. So status and certainty. The next one is autonomy. That I feel like I have some choice in the matter. That I can, something that's important to me, I can make a decision about that. So the way to bring that into a facilitation might be, if the group have all the stuff they want to do, you might say, well, you can choose between doing A or B. Would you like to do this in smaller groups or bigger groups or whatever? And that gives a sense of autonomy. There's still something they have a choice about. The next one is relatedness, and that is that there's a sense that we are all in this together, and that I am part of this and I'm not being isolated. So, if there's something going on in a group over here and there's someone over here thinking, I'm not participating in that, I don't feel like I'm part of that, I'm isolating, they're not, we can definitely go into a threat response around that. And the final one is fairness, and that is that what's going on is fair, that someone sent, and that's a pretty strong one for me, I have to say. If I think something's not fair, then I get a bit up in arms. And an example from yesterday actually is I've been watching a nurse's blog. I'm interested. There's a pay talk going on at the moment, and a couple of nurses have set up a Facebook page called Nurse Florence, and the most wonderful nursing stories are coming out. The nurses are telling their stories about their work, and they put up a thing yesterday to say that someone had been trying to shut them down and got onto Facebook and say that Nurse Florence wasn't an actual person, so they shouldn't have this website, right? And the fairness thing in me is like strong, like that's just not right. These guys need to be able to tell their story, and it's important, and too bad for whoever's wanting to shut them down. So in terms of a facilitator and scarf, keeping people away from a threat response is making sure when you design and run the day that you are acknowledging each of those things, and in fact moving them into a reward state where they will use their brain. So giving them a lot of positives about working together and making decisions, and that they're bringing knowledge to the room, for example, will acknowledge their status. So it's not just about the threat response and not getting there. It's also about acknowledging that to keep them in that lovely moving toward space.
Out of the SCARF, how do you find out which one's the strongest for you? Is there an assessment, or do you sort of, because I was listening to what you were saying and I think I'm autonomy, but is there a quiz that we can do? Or
there is a SCARF, let's think about it model. It's pretty simple in terms of just going through and defining which each of them are, and you going, I can see that in me. And I'm more this, but status is not a big one for me, but it can be at certain times, so it's a great one to reflect on, and also then to notice when you have been scarfed, like, okay, I can see that there's an autonomy thing here. I need to have some choice. I can see that I've been scarfed.
Yeah, I'm going to start thinking about that this week. See where things trigger me. Hey, we've mentioned so you mentioned Brené Brown and David Rock. Are there any other sort of books or resources that you could recommend to someone that's starting their facilitation journey?
I sure can. There is a book that I found once I moved from just occasionally running meetings or teleconferences, and someone actually asked me to facilitate, and I had that word connected with whatever I was going to do. I found a book, Facilitation Secrets, It's by an American guy called Michael Wilkinson. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is just the best. So the thing that I still carry from that book that I learned very early was getting clear about the purpose of the day, and then using a lot of meta communication through the day to make people clear where you are in that process. Of saying, we've just done session 1. The purpose of that session was this. It ties into that. We're now moving to this part, the purpose of this, and how it attaches to the bigger purpose. To give people confidence. I mean, again, it comes to SCARF, doesn't it? Certainty around where they are and what happens. So that book there, for me, was a bit of a game changer in terms of giving me the tools to make this rather shy introvert feel that I could confidently step forward.
Wow.
It was pretty important to me in those early days.
It's probably a bit of a dog-eared version at the moment.
It's an old version, and it's just covered in, I've got so many of those sticky things sticking out the side, those tabs.
Hopefully it's still out and being published, and maybe one day I'll get to interview the author of that book if it was so influential.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, well, I think it will definitely be out there because he has a company called, I think it's called Leadership Strategies. They have a work website and they offer courses, and I know they offer courses in Australia. Definitely there's an opportunity to use his work.
Yeah, we'll check it out. So it's been so wonderful hearing from you today about your journey, the models that you use, the vulnerability, SCARF, books that you recommend, and really all leading back to how you prepare for your workshops in terms of the questions that you use and finding out what the purpose is. Finally, I guess where can people find you if they'd like to hear more from you?
So can I just say thank you, Leanne, for the opportunity to talk with you.
You're very welcome.
And the fact that I had to reflect, and think about what had been going on. If people want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a website which is artemisgroup.co.nz in New Zealand, and I'm on Twitter, although I'm a pretty bad tweeter. But LinkedIn's a pretty good way to find me.
Awesome. And just a quick question, final question. Why did you decide on the name Artemis?
Because I'm into from about 15 years ago, I was very much into goddesses. I thought women should be, all women are goddesses, even if they don't know it. And I wanted a goddess name for my company, and I chose Artemis because she's a warrior goddess, but she's also known as a nurturer. And so she's got a tough, can get out there and do the work, but she's also a nurturer of plants and animals, and she's the sort of patron goddess of midwifery.
Oh, what a perfect match. Look, thanks again, Sue.
Look, you're welcome. Thanks, Leanne.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview. And if you like the content, please share the episode with a fellow first-time facilitator friend, or support the show by subscribing to it, rating and reviewing it in iTunes or your favourite podcast app. See you next time.